Ready? Fire! Close quarters advance! Close quarters retreat! Charge in the cylinder, and now I'm putting cream of wheat on top of the powder. Cream of wheat takes the place of the bullet. If I point the gun down, the powder won't fall out. But in real life, we would have put balls in there on top of the powder to kill rebels. Then I roll the gun over, and I hate my cap tin. And I have to put caps on the ends of the cones. These caps will make a spark when the hammer strikes the cap and set the powder charge off and throw the cream of wheat out the barrel. But I usually set my tin down. And I'm trying to hold my tin. Yeah, you give me the caps. Give me about 5 caps, or just give me a few caps. That's okay. And I have to do this 6 times. And y'all might think this is slow and crude, but this is the top of the line technology in 1865. And okay, now my revolver's loaded.
Hello, my name is Eric Sorensen. I'm a citizen, live here in Pinson, and my family has been here since 1822, and so this local Pinson history has always interested me. It's been my hobby all my life. Turkey Creek has always interested me. I grew up on this creek. I learned to swim in this creek. Every major point in my life has been involved in this and around this creek. But that's me. Now I'm going to take you back in time. We're going back to April the 19th, 1865. April the 19th, 1865, Croxton's Raiders came through here after they destroyed the town of Tuscaloosa. But I'm going to take you even back further than that. Our history goes back to the fall of 1813. Colonel Coffee under Andrew Jackson came through here. And Colonel Coffee's men was so impressed with this area that when the land was open for settlement in 1819, a lot of them came in. But they were so impressed, some of them were coming in 1816 and 1818 before this land was open for settlement after the Indian Wars ended in 1815. And so this, to me, this is the most unique historical site in Jefferson County. When I get through telling you the history here, I challenge you to name another place in Jefferson County that has this much history. In the fall of 1813, when Colonel Coffee came through this area, there was a couple of key people with Colonel Coffee. Along with Colonel Coffee was a man named Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett was a sergeant of the Scouts. And so there's a good chance that Davy Crockett was the first American to ever see these waterfalls at Turkey Creek. And not necessarily the first white man, because the British may have come through here trading, and the French may have come through here trading with the Indians, but the first American would have been Davy Crockett or one of his scouts. Along with Davy Crockett was a man named John Handy. John Handy is listed on Coffee's roster as a machinist. Why he put machinist, I don't know. Why did the cavalry need a machinist? I don't think they did. I believe his fingers just wouldn't make the word blacksmith. And so when the Indian Wars ended, we believe the Indian Wars ended in 1815. We believe in 1816, John Handy came into this area and started scouting out the land again, because a half mile upstream is pockets of iron ore. Half-mile downstream is pockets of coal. Here's a waterfall. It's a source of energy. That's what a machinist needs to produce iron. And this, I'm standing on the location where his dam was built. These two holes drilled in the creek. Every 8 feet, there's 2 holes bored across the bottom of this creek. So these are the anchors that held his dam up to run the grist mill behind the big rock. Okay, now we've stepped up one level. We're probably about 10 or 15 feet from the foundations of the grist mill. But what's unique about this area up here, John Handy utilized the energy from the water wheel at the grist mill to run an iron forge off to my left here, and that would be the first iron forge in Jefferson County, one of the iron centers of the United States. This mound I'm standing on is presently under an archaeological survey. This would be the Hanby's reheat forge. Behind me in that greenery would be the bloom forge. He would make blooms which would require a continuous blow of air through a bellows. And he would make bloom iron. He would take the blooms to this reheat forge and rework them into workable iron, but he could use a hand bellows here. He didn't need the water power. Okay, we're still up in the iron forge area right beside the grist mill. This little ramp you see behind me would be where John and David Hanby would run carts of iron ore and coal up and down this ramp to feed the forge. Now we're at the location of the Hanby home site. This flat area was where the house sat. And we haven't talked about David Hanby, John Hanby's son. In 1822, John Hanby gives the enterprise to his son David. David turns 21 in 1822. John goes up towards Locust Fork and moves in with his brother Gabriel Hanby, and David Hanby runs the enterprise here from 1822 on to April the 19th, 1865, when we shut it down. All right, but this David Hanby was running not just an iron forge, a grist mill. David Hanby had an iron forge, grist mill, a niter works. He made gunpowder, and he had a tavern here, and people would come and stay at the tavern. But also, the most key thing in my mind that David Hanby did, he was the first coal miner in the state of Alabama. Where Turkey Creek goes into the Locust Fork River, coal outcropped on the riverbanks. And David Hanby would build flatboats, and they would rest on the bottom of the Locust Fork River. They would fill the boats with coal, and in the spring when the river flooded, he would float that coal down to Mobile. Some years he would float as many as 125 boats, and some years he was making as much as $6,000 a year alone on coal. So David Hanby was doing very well. All right, we're standing in the front of the foundations of David Hanby's house. David Hanby, it was a 2-level house with a lattice front porch that came across, and the lattice turned down the left-hand side of the house. And also to the right of the house was a large boulder. And David Hanby's tavern, the corner of David Hanby's tavern, rested on that large boulder. Now we're about 25 yards from the left side of the Hanby house. This was the Hanby spring. These stones are set in place. They're cut and set. And they would have been a spring house here, but the spring house is long gone. But the spring is still here. The water is still good. The water is drinkable. And if the leaves were cleared out, this spring would be about over 2.5 foot deep, and these stones are cut to fit in place. There's 4 protected species living in a 7-mile stretch of this area we're in right now. There's the vermilion darter that lives nowhere else in the world but right here where we're standing. There's the watercress darter, which is federally protected. There's the rush darter, which is federally protected. And there's a depressed musk turtle here at this creek that's federally protected. All Right now we walked around from the mill race. The mill race went behind this big rock, so we walked around behind the rock. The grist mill stood here where we were standing. The wheel stood against the rock, and it was a top water bed, so the race would hit the top, the water would hit the top of the wheel and spin the wheel to grind the corn for the grist mill. But John Handy was a unique person. He had another use for the energy from this water wheel besides just grinding corn to the grits. There's a stone wall. What's the only thing that's remaining of the actual grist mill is a stone wall that I'm facing. So as far as I know, this is the last remains of John Handy's grist mill. This stone wall. I have a 1907 photograph of this stone wall, and this is the corner. This makes a corner here, and the corner has been destroyed since 1907, but it's obvious how the stones have just been slightly shifted. This stone would sit right here. This stone would sit right here, and it wouldn't be hard to put the corner of this wall back together. Okay, now we're going to talk about when we came through here, when the Federal Army came through here. I'm a member of the 6th Kentucky Cavalry U.S. and I'm under General Croxton. General Croxton's job initially was to destroy Tuscaloosa, and then after he destroys Tuscaloosa, his job was to meander around, confuse General Forrest if possible, and not let Forrest know that General Wilson is going to destroy Selma, and also demoralize the women and children in this area, demoralize them but not physically harm them, demoralize them to the point where they would want to write letters to their husbands and beg their husbands to quit the war and come home. They would want the children to write letters to their fathers, quit the Confederate Army and come home. We would go into the houses, and we'd take everything out of a house. We would pile it up in the front yard, and we would pick out what we wanted, and we would destroy the rest. We would leave the women with nothing but a crying baby in her arm. And then we would go to the next house and do the same thing. And so, but we had made our way up from Tuscaloosa, after we destroyed Tuscaloosa, meandering, zigzagging, circling, we got to Jasper. When we got up to Jasper, we heard about the iron forges here at Turkey Creek. So we go beeline from Jasper to Pinson, Alabama at Turkey Creek and destroy David Handy's iron forge and his niter works and his grist mill. David Handy at that time, in April 19th, 1865, was 64 years old, and he was deaf. Probably deaf from working in the iron forges. And at that time, your hogs ran loose in the woods. And every spring, you would have to go in the woods and find your female hogs and mark the babies. And whatever mark you had, that was your mark. Nobody else messed with your pigs, and you didn't mess with anybody else's pigs. David Handy went hogging that morning. He gets back, and he had a rifle because he was hogging, because some of these mother hogs don't like you to put marks on their babies' ears. And so he sits down under a tree in front of his house. And we come up hard, we come up fast, and everybody runs. All these people that's working for David Handy hits the woods. They run. Except for that one old man sitting under that tree with a rifle in his lap. He don't get up and run. So we shoot and kill David Handy, and then find out that he was asleep and deaf and didn't know that we were there. Like I said elsewhere on this documentary, that I'm Eric Sorensen. I'm from Pinson, Alabama. My family has always been here. And I grew up on this creek. All of my key points of my life has been on this creek. I've learned to fish this creek. I learned to swim this creek. I drank my first beer on this creek. And it suits me if I die on this creek. This creek has been my life. And as I got older, I loved the creek as I was young. As I got older, I learned to appreciate it more. Not just me and my love of this creek is going to save it. What we need to do is get everybody in the community, everybody in Jefferson County, in the state of Alabama, involved in trying to protect this beautiful creek we have.